All right, let's go ahead and get started. So over the next 10 weeks, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about a variety of different topics as we go. Okay, so bringing a journal would be a good thing to do. Doing anything like that so that you guys can remember what we talk about. The other thing too is I'll sporadically send stuff out that I find that I think would be valuable, whether it's on topic or not, and just send it to the GroupMe. So those are all things that you guys can use as resources as well. But I have a different subject that I want to discuss every week for the next 10 weeks. Okay, every single Thursday at 10 a.m. we'll be here. Okay. But today, what I want to talk about is I want to talk about awareness and self-evaluation. Okay. So when you're trying to make a change, whether that's in the mental game or physically or whatever, you can't make that change until you're aware that you're doing something wrong or what you're trying to do better. Does that make sense? So one of the things that I encourage everybody to do is try to do some practical things to get better at their self-awareness. Just going right into it, the thing with mental performance that I hate is just a cool quote, a cool saying, XYZ, with nothing practical. Nothing actually like, okay, how do I get better at this specific aspect of the game? So for majority of these things, I'm going to give you practical things that you can do. So for example, we'll begin this right now. We're sitting where you are. I want you all to take a deep breath and then close your eyes. Okay, take a deep breath on me. Close your eyes. Breathe out. I want you to draw attention to the tips of your toes. Now bring your attention back to your breath. I want you to feel your shoulders. Are they tense? Are they relaxed? If they're tense, loosen them. Breathe into it. Attention back to your breath, right in that area between your nose and your mouth. Now I want you to bring your attention to the tips of your ears. Is your hair touching them? Are they a little cold? Can you feel that? Bring your attention back to your breath. Give me 2 good breaths. Now open your eyes and bring your attention back to me. Okay, so that's a quick, practical way to actually practice your awareness. So a lot of the time meditating, or which is basically what we just did, can seem all woo-woo and fancy. But at the end of the day, it's practicing your awareness. If you see it drift, it's not judgment, right? It's not being like beating yourself up for getting distracted. It's just bringing yourself back to the moment as quick as you can, right? Your ability, that's why on the pitching side, why we have so many people do eyes closed throwing, because it allows you to be more aware of where your body is at in space. Okay. Meditation is doing that same thing. Okay. But for your thoughts. Does that make sense? Whether or not we're on task or not. So that's a practice that I encourage people to do, whether it's pre-practice, pre-game, something, just to make sure that you're aware of what you're focusing on. Does that make sense? Okay. What I want you guys to think about too is just reflect a little bit, and I want you to think about a game-changing moment that you were involved in, whether or not you personally or your team, and I want you to think of a good one where you were focusing on the right things at the right time, and think of a bad one where maybe you got distracted. Just take a little bit of time here, because I can think of 6 immediately. Right, where my awareness drifted or a teammate's awareness drifted and they focused on the wrong thing, or they weren't paying attention, or they weren't in the right spot at the right time, right, because they got distracted. Right, this is kind of funny that we're talking about this today, after the frustrating first game that we had yesterday, right, where there was awareness, distraction, things pulling us in opposite directions, right, that weren't able to allow us to be the best of our ability, right, compete to the best of our ability, okay? But at the end of the day, if you aren't good and at knowing where your awareness is being placed, you're not going to know if it's not on task. Does that make sense? With that said, there's also an importance of, you've probably been told before, or if you have, let me know, of you need to know your why. right? Has anybody heard that before? You need to know your why, right? All right. And at the end of the day, you need to know your why for like competition's sake of like, why do you play baseball in the first place? But you also need to know your why in the sense of like, if you don't know what the task is or the direction you want to go, you won't know if you're off it. Does that make sense? Right? You won't know if you strayed from the path if you don't know which direction you want to go. Okay. And with your awareness, with your mental game, you need to have a moment with yourself of understanding what type of player do I want to be? Where do I want my focus to be on a daily basis? Moment to moment, pitch to pitch, right? Because if you don't define that, you won't know when you're not up to the standards that you've set for yourself. Does that make sense? Okay. The other thing too that I feel is extremely valuable in detailing awareness personally is self-reflection. Okay. And I'm gonna send you guys a couple. Like I'll send them in the group me of a couple self-reflection sheets that I've used before in the past that have been helpful for position players and pitchers. But there's a couple different aspects of it that reflection that are important. So like I think of like everything in 3 categories. So you can prepare, you can compete, and you can progress. Okay. So when you're preparing, what I want you to think about is making sure that you're attacking, like you have a plan for what you want to do that day. Does that make sense? Whether it's in game, whether it's in practice, whatever, you have to have a plan as you're preparing. Okay. When you're competing, what I want you to constantly tie into is not only if you're focusing on the right things at the right time, but where are you at on a controlled intensity scale? Okay. Like controlled, a 1 would be the most casual guy that you've ever seen. Right, guy, you can't even tell if he's playing baseball or not. Like he seems the same if he's at dinner or if he's in the batter's box. Right, the most controlled, emotional guy that you've ever seen. And 10 would be the most intense baseball player you've ever played with. Crazy dude. Everybody competes best somewhere along that scale. And so I'm not saying you need to change that. What I'm saying is be aware of where you compete best. Right, if you think you're a 6 but you really compete best at a 4, then if you're constantly trying to hype yourself up more than you need, you're doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. So I'm not saying change something or say this is who I want to be, but be aware of when you do well, where are you at on that scale? When you do badly, where are you at on that scale? I know for me personally, I competed best at a 3 or a 4, right? And if I got any higher than that, the game would speed up on me, right? If I was any lower than that, then I didn't care enough, to actually do well, right? So I knew that if I was at a 3, that's where I was going to compete best. But it took me some time to figure that out. I had to be aware of where I was at emotionally before I could try to replicate it. Does that make sense? Like I just noticed, okay, hey, I did really well that outing. I was at a 3 basically the whole time. Maybe I need to, I did best when I was singing the batters walk-up songs as they were walking up. You know what I mean? I'm just chilling. About to pitch, about to strike this guy out, but I'm singing his song back to him. Like that's when I competed best, right? So with that, then progress. Anytime that you reflect on an outing, reflect on a practice, reflect on anything, there's 3 questions I want you to ask yourself. I want you to ask yourself what you did well, what you could have done better, and how you're going to do it, okay? All those things are tangible, okay? If you can't answer the how for what you want to do better, then that's the wrong answer. All right? Like if you give yourself something like, hey, I could have gotten more hits. Okay, well, how? If you can't answer that question, then be more specific with what you could have done better, right? Maybe I could have done better at pitch selection, right? I could have not missed the fastball when it was in fastball counts, right? Don't say I could have just done better. That doesn't make sense, right? Give yourself as specific of an answer as you can. Like, okay, hey, yeah, I probably could have thrown more strikes. Okay, be specific. Okay, hey, yeah, I could have thrown my breaking ball over. I needed to practice that. I should have practiced that more this week so that I could get me over curveballs for strikes. No big deal, right? That's a specific what you could have done better, and you know how to do it, right? But like I said, I'm also going to send you guys reflection sheets that kind of go more in depth. I just encourage you guys to start doing some sort of practice, right? A lot of people journal. And journaling is very, very good, but if you haven't ever done that, it's very difficult to start. You don't know what to think about, what to ask yourself. So I'll send you guys those. You can start doing them. before outings or after outings and after games, and hopefully that will help you be more aware of where you're at in the moment. Does that make sense? If we take some time to reflect afterwards, it helps practice in the moment there. Okay. Last thing. Last thing. A lot of the time when it comes to awareness and it comes to self-reflection, two more things actually, is when it comes to self-reflection, you need to know yourself. So in addition to knowing your why, you need to be able to know your own scouting report. Right? I read a story in the Hard 90 by Zach Sorensen. He's a mental performance coach for the Guardians, I believe, or possibly the Braves. One of the two. Anyway, he's a mental performance coach for them. And he played Major League Baseball. He's an infielder. And he had a story where when he was in the minor leagues, he was stuck in Double A and he was pissed. Right? He was like, I can't get any better. This is pissing me off. What's going on? So he ends up... he knows that his coach is constantly sending feedback to the pro organization about him, about everything that he does well, everything that he struggles with. That's like their job as a manager, is to give them evaluations on the players. So one day Zach comes up to his manager and says, hey, could you send me the scouting report that you have on me? And the head coach is like, well, I'm going to have to ask if we're allowed to do that. I can't just send that information to you, but I'll see what they say and I'll let you know. And so the manager ends up coming back to him. He's like, hey, he cleared me, but it's 50 pages. Like we're in depth. Like you were a high draft, like a high guy. Like we have a lot of information about you. It's all the good things, but it's definitely all the bad. There's every reason why we believe you're stuck in Double A is in this packet. Are you sure you want to read it? Right? And he's like, yes. So he ends up giving it to him. They move on. And he comes back the next day, and the manager's surprised because he sees Zach is in the best mood that he's seen him since he showed up and got promoted to Double A in the first place. Right? He's like, what in the world's going on? Like, why are you so chipper? You just read a 50-page document of why you suck and you're never going to make it to the major leagues. Right? And Zach turns to him and says, well, hey, now I know everything I need to improve upon in order to get to where I want to go. I know it, right? I know for a matter of fact I need to get better at hitting, being a situational hitter. I need to quit worrying about my defense so much because that's good and that's not limiting me. It's the fact that I can't throw the ball over the first. I can't sack bunt when you ask me to. It's the fact that I can't move a guy over when you ask me to. Those are the things that are going to keep me, right? The fact that I can't handle a breaking ball, those are the things that are going to keep me from there, right? But not all of us have the luxury of having somebody who has a scouting report on us, so we need to develop our own. Does that make sense? So try to look at yourself objectively, whether it's through your reflections or just in general, and know what do you do exceptionally well, what makes you you, what makes you the college baseball player that has gotten you to the level that you are now, and what are your weaknesses. Be brutally honest, right? No one should be harder on you than you are on yourself, right? And that's usually the case, especially with baseball players. It's a game of failure. Everyone's harder on themselves than everything. That's why the majority of my job is reminding you of how good you are, right? You guys are all in the 1% playing college baseball. Like, remind yourself of that. But anyway, be honest with yourself. Have a self-evaluation, because if you don't know, like I said, the path of knowing where you want to go, a lot of that is going to be dictated on what your weaknesses are or what your strengths are, right? And don't get obsessed with trying to fix the weaknesses. Sometimes you just need to exploit the strengths. Right? Be really good at what you're good at. So good that your weaknesses don't matter anymore. Right? You don't always have to fix everything that you're not good at. Okay? Last thing I got for you is when it comes to awareness and it comes to self-reflection, defining things is extremely important. Okay? So you have to define, like, your mental state will help you know where you're at. Does that make sense? So it's good to be like, okay, hey, I'm going to check in and I'm going to be aware of what I feel like. But if you don't define that, then it's going to be kind of arbitrary, right? Like, I was in a good mood while I was playing. Okay, well, what's a good mood mean, right? So what I highly encourage people to do is use a stoplight system. So green light, yellow light, red light, just how you normally would, right? A green light, it means that you're good to go. You're just cruising, right? Everything's going your way. You're happy-go-lucky. The ball looks like a beach ball. You can land any pitch you want in the zone. Everything's good, okay? A yellow light is when you're getting distracted, okay? So like a green light would be dialed in, yellow light's distracted, Okay, you kind of like your focus wanes a little bit, but if you have high awareness, you realize that and you could possibly do something to get yourself back on track, right? You know that this is the path and you kind of went this way for a little bit. That's a yellow light. And a red light, you're completely defeated. Like you probably need to be taken out of the game, need a complete reset, that kind of thing, okay? We'll talk more, especially next week, about what we can actually do when we're in those situations of where we're at a yellow light or a red light. But for now, what I would encourage you guys to do is over the course of the next week, just try to be aware of where am I at emotionally. After a strikeout, does that immediately make me go into a yellow light or maybe a red, right? After I give up a hit, do I immediately go into a red, or does it have to be something where I messed up? Where all of a sudden, okay, hey, I left a ball over the middle. Now I'm pissed at myself, red light, right? But be aware of that. Know where you're at, okay? We'll talk more about what to do when you feel like you're in those situations and have an actual plan. But I want you guys to spend this next week practicing your awareness, okay? Being aware of where you're at emotionally and trying to curate a personal scouting report, okay? We'll dive deeper on what to actually do with those things next week, okay? Everybody good? Any questions? Any questions? Anything specific?
Is that kind of homework you want us to try to make our own scouting report?
I would love that. Yep. Now you don't have to give it to me, but I want you to have it for yourself. Does that make sense? I want you to look in the mirror and say, these are my strengths, these are what makes me me, these are my weaknesses, right? And if you guys need a little perspective on whether or not those weaknesses need addressed or if we just need to exploit your strengths, right? Because there's a lot of people who like if Manny Ramirez tried to be a contact hitter, he wouldn't be Manny Ramirez. You know what I mean? Like it's those kind of things. Or like all of a sudden you see like if Nolan Ryan wanted to start throwing knuckleballs because he didn't have a knuckleball, that wouldn't be good? You understand what I mean? So there's some things that are weaknesses that we don't need to address. Does that make sense? Sometimes we just need to like use our strengths over and over and over and over. What makes you you? Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Appreciate you guys taking the time, and I'll see you next week. All right. Good work.